When we talk about world politics, we usually think about the big stuff, the headlines, the wars, the trade deals. But today, we're going to go a little deeper. We're on the hunt for the hidden rulebook, right? The unspoken assumptions that secretly guide every theory, every political move. And to find it, we have to start with one really fundamental question.
So here it is. Is studying global politics a science, kind of like physics? Or is it more of an art, like history? Now, that might seem simple, but believe me, your answer to this one question changes absolutely everything. It decides what you study, how you study it, and what you even consider to be knowledge in the first place. And to even start to answer that science versus art question, we gotta look at something called meta-theory. I know, that sounds super academic, maybe a little intimidating, but stick with me. Just think of it as the secret room where all the real rules of world politics are written down. So what is this meta-theory thing? Well, put simply, it's the theory about theories. It doesn't really care about a specific war or trade deal. Instead, it digs into the big assumptions a thinker makes before they even start their research. It's kind of like peeling back the layers of an onion, trying to find that tiny core belief that holds the whole thing together. And look, this whole conversation, it is not new. The entire field of international relations, what folks call IR, was basically forged in a series of huge, knockdown, drag-out debates over these core ideas. So let's take a quick look at the history of these intellectual battles. The field pretty much grew up fighting with itself. Right after World War I, you had the idealists and the realists going at it. Then in the 60s, a huge fight broke out between the traditionalists and the more scientific behaviorists. The 70s and 80s, it was a free-for-all, with multiple theories all battling for the top spot. But since the mid-80s, we've been stuck in what's called the fourth debate, and this one's a fight for the very soul of how we study our world. Okay, let's zoom in on that second debate in the 60s, because this was a massive turning point. This is when a group of scholars, the behaviorists, came out swinging. They argued that if IR wanted to be taken seriously, if it wanted to be a real science, it had to act like one. It had to be just as rigorous, just as systematic, and modeled on fields like physics or chemistry. And this moment set the stage for one very specific idea of science to completely take over. And that dominant idea of science, well, it has a name: positivism. For decades, this single philosophy became so powerful that a lot of people just assumed it was science, plain and simple. So let's peel back that next layer of our onion and see what it's all about. At its core, positivism is all about what you can observe. It basically argues that the only genuine knowledge we can have is based on stuff we can actually experience with our senses. If you can't see it, touch it, or measure it, well, then it's just not the stuff of real science. It's all about empirical data, period. And just to show you how deeply this idea took hold, check this out. This quote isn't from some obscure philosophy textbook. It's literally carved into the stone of a major university's social science building. The message could not be clearer. If it's not measurable, it's not worth knowing. So the positivist playbook is pretty straightforward. First, you only focus on what you can observe. Step 2, you collect mountains of data to find repeating patterns. The ultimate goal? Turn those patterns into general laws, kind of like the law of gravity, that can explain and maybe even predict behavior. Now, this means you have to ignore all that messy, unobservable stuff like culture or social norms. The end game is to produce knowledge that's useful, knowledge that lets us predict and control what happens in the world. But, this kind of dominance couldn't last forever. In the 1980s, the fourth debate kicked off, and it completely split the field in two. Scholars started to ask a really important question. Is the positivist way really the only way to study our incredibly complex world? And this fight created some pretty clear battlegrounds. So the first big divide is about the goal of the research itself. Are we trying to explain behavior from the outside, like a scientist looking at atoms? That's the positivist approach, right? Hunting for general causes, using lots of numbers. Or are we trying to understand it from the inside? That's the interpretive approach. It's all about trying to grasp the meanings, the beliefs, and the reasons that actually motivate people. And for that, you need qualitative methods. And this brings us to two key labels. On one side, you have positivism, we've got that down, but on the other side, you have this big category called post-positivism. Now, post-positivism isn't one single theory, it's more like a giant umbrella for everyone who rejects the positivist rulebook. The one thing they all agree on, Studying human beings just isn't the same as studying rocks or planets. And here's one more set of labels you'll see for this same exact divide. On the positivist side, you often find rationalism. This approach tends to see countries as rational actors, always trying to get more power or more wealth, and it's all about predicting what they'll do next. On the other side, you have reflectivism. This camp throws out the scientific model and instead focuses on interpretation, and it asks how our own theories actually help shape the world we're trying to study. Okay, so we've seen all the battle lines, explaining versus understanding, positivism versus post-positivism, but what's really at the heart of all this conflict? Well, we've finally peeled back all the layers of the onion. It all boils down to two deep, fundamental philosophical questions. The first question is about something called ontology. It sounds complicated, but it's really just the theory of being. It's asking, what is the social world fundamentally made of? Is it made up of individual people and states with material interests? Or is it actually made up of ideas, norms, and shared beliefs? What are the basic building blocks of reality that we're studying? And hot on its heels is the second question, epistemology. This is the theory of knowledge. It asks, okay, given what the world is made of, how can we possibly know anything about it? Can we stand outside of it and observe it objectively, like a scientist in a lab? Or are we always part of the world we're studying, influencing it with our own perspectives? And this right here, this is the crucial point. This is the light bulb moment that connects everything. Your ontological assumption, what you believe the world is made of, directly locks in your epistemological position, how you believe you can study it. See, if you think the world is just a collection of observable material facts, then of course you'll be a positivist. But if you think it's made of ideas and shared meanings, you just can't be. This single connection is the engine that drives every single one of those great debates. So let's be real. Ontology, epistemology, why should anyone outside of a university philosophy class care about any of this? Well, it turns out these abstract, hidden assumptions have massive, real-world consequences. They determine the kind of theories we build, and ultimately, the kinds of solutions we imagine for the world's biggest problems. And you can see exactly how this plays out in the kinds of theories people come up with. A positivist, they're going to build an explanatory theory, something that finds causes and tries to predict the future. But someone with totally different assumptions might build a critical theory to expose injustice, or maybe a normative theory to explore what the world ought to be like. And still others create constitutive theories, which don't look for causes at all. They just ask how our shared ideas actually create things, like the state or human rights in the first place. See? Different assumptions lead to completely different projects. And that's the real bottom line. These meta-theoretical choices, these hidden rules of the game, they aren't just for academics to argue about. They set the boundaries for our entire political imagination. They determine which questions even get asked in the halls of power, which facts are seen as important, and which policy solutions are even considered possible. Which brings us right back to where we started, but with a much, much deeper question. The real issue isn't really, is it a science or an art? It's this. If the hidden rules we start with fundamentally shape everything we see, is a truly objective view of world politics even possible? That's something to chew on. Thanks for joining us.